You want to talk about prompt dependency? That was a fun one.
Do it. This was another question. How do you deal with prompt dependency?
I bang my head against the wall. What do you do? Oh my gosh, it happens to so many students. I think part of it has to do with how we're teaching as well. You know, I look at our program descriptions, and a lot of our program descriptions have the different steps, you know, broken down, you know, for instance, categories, you know, you're teaching across operants, blah, 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 blah. You know, a lot of people read those programs and say, okay, we're going to teach each one to mastery, and then we'll move on, and then we'll move on, and then we'll move on. And sometimes you get learners and you have to say, listen, like, we're going to teach within a program instead of across programs or across sessions. What does that mean? So if I'm teaching within a session, what that means is that I'm going to take data on the end goal. So my end goal, for instance, is to teach Shira, I don't know, your ads, your labels. Okay. I'm just going to say something like a backward chain. Bear with me here, like a phone number. Okay. Yes, 555-5555. I'm going to teach Shira her phone number. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to, you know, have the phone number out here. Now, if I keep her on a full text queue for 2 sessions until mastery, and then I start fading, it's going to take me at least a few weeks to teach her her phone number. But if I take data just on her, whether she can say her phone number, hey, Shira, what's your phone number?
555.
Oh my gosh, you need a program. Pretend, Shira, you don't have a program.
Oh, sorry.
And then I start teaching and I fade within. So she's starting to get it, and then I can fade, I can fade, I can fade. So you're fading within the session instead of across sessions. That seems to help a little bit with prompt dependency. The other thing would be is really working on what prompts. So what prompts are you giving? If it's something like life skills that you're teaching, life skills is, you know, text cues, trying not to embed the instructor into the interaction.
No verbal prompts. Those really are the worst.
Sometimes when I go in and I see a life skills program being run, so for instance, wash hands, okay, turn on the tap, okay, now put your hands under, okay, now do this, okay, count to 10. What I'm doing is I'm embedding myself in that interaction. So the student is actually waiting for me to say, do the next step, do the next step, do the next step. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with that if I'm always going to be in the bathroom all the time with this student. But I'm not. I don't want to be. So we will need to the student to be able to pay attention to other cues instead. Get them away from my voice. Get them away from even me pointing to the tap, gestures, anything that I'm embedded in that teaching interaction. I'm not going to be able to take a step back. So that's the first thing. Analyze if you are embedded into that teaching interaction in any kind of way, if it's a life skill, and figure out how to get yourself out of there. Is there some kind of visual you can use? Does your child read? If your child reads, that's awesome. You can, you know, put together a text cue. You can, you know, do board maker symbols if your child doesn't read. You can take actual pictures and put them up and really teach them to pay attention to those salient cues instead of yourself.
I've had students who were so sensitive to prompt dependency that it was even, they would even just look at the teacher's face to see, like, should I do this? Should I move on? And like by the teacher's reactions, they could tell if like it was right or if it was wrong. And they need so much of that reassurance. So I think look at what you're doing. Are you sitting across from the student? Are you like are they so dependent on you coaxing them along? Or are you able to back away a little bit and kind of check in and check out? It's for this reason why we often teach students an independent activity schedule, because they're learning those independent skills. If you can get them to complete activities without needing somebody beside them, then hopefully that will generalize to other things, or able to do more things independently, which is really important.
I think the other thing we need to look at for kiddos who are, you know, have more language skills, etc., is tolerates errors, right? So you need to look at why these students are prompt dependent. And a lot of these students are prompt dependent because they don't want to make mistakes. I don't want to make mistakes, do you? No, nobody does. So even getting them to tolerate errors, and we have that in our behavior section. So take a look online in the behavior section, but there's a program called Tolerates Errors. And really what it comes down to is the very first step is the therapist pretending that they've made a mistake and going, it's okay. Oh man, just made a mistake. Oh, it's okay. Look, I took a deep breath. I can do it. Oh, it's okay. I made a mistake. I've even gone so far as when I'm the therapist. Hey, I've made a mistake. I got a chocolate chip. I'm eating chocolate in the session. It's great. You know, and then teaching them that it's okay to make errors. Now, some questions I've gotten with that program are, wow, if you're reinforcing a student to make errors and you're reinforcing edibles or tokens, points, etc., is the student going to want to make errors all the time? My answer to that is no. I mean, I've taught a lot of students to tolerate errors, and because that need to not make errors, or that I don't want to make errors, is so intact in them, it's very aversive for them to make errors that they really don't want to, regardless of what the motivation is to make the error. So I don't see anybody who's typically going out of their way to make errors so that they can have chocolate. Although that's actually a good idea.
That's like the higher functioning, type of prompt dependency. And I think with some of the students we see who are like much lower functioning, for lack of a better word, when they become prompt dependent, is trying to figure out what prompts we could just keep in. Like sometimes they'll always need to rely on a visual prompt. They may always need certain text cues, or like we've had students who they always have their stuff. They always keep their stuff in the same cubby because like they're not going to learn to go from different cubbies. We've had students who are learning to use pictures, and I know that like the PECS program, for example, says to mix up all the pictures every time so that they're discriminating, but our kids couldn't learn to discriminate. So we just kept them in the same place, and then they were more successful. So with that prompt, they just learned that my juice box is always in the top corner of this page.
You know what, Shira, I'm going to cut you off right there. I had a speech pathologist tell me, Shanna, look at your phone. And so I looked at my phone, and she said, those apps that are on your phone, have they always been in that same corner of your page? Like when you go to get into your email, or when you go to get into Safari, where do you go? I'm like, oh, it's right here. And they said, if I grab my husband's phone, I'm so lost. I have to search for what have you. So no, I don't think that should be a step on PECS to mix up the pictures on a kiddo. That's like mixing up my apps on a phone, right? So aversive.
Yeah, so we just figured out like what prompt was going to be doable for the student to just keep. And we never faded it. Like we didn't need to fade it so that they can discriminate. So that's also important to kind of think outside the box as to what's functional and doable for your learner within, the prompt hierarchy.